They say you should never touch a wounded animal, because it will bite. But what happens when you save the mother of the deadliest predator in the city? Sienna Brooks was just a nurse working the graveyard shift, trying to survive her own debts. But on a rainy Tuesday, she made a choice that would bring the New York underworld to its knees. She saved her the matriarch of the Moretti crime family. Everyone expected a reward. Everyone expected a thank you. But what Dominic Moretti did next didn't just break the rules, it shattered them. This is the story of how one act of mercy started a war. The rain in Brooklyn didn't wash things clean, it just made the grime slicker. Sienna Brooks adjusted the strap of her tote bag, her knuckles white against the worn leather. It was 3 a.m. Her shift at St. Jude's Hospital had ended 40 minutes ago, but she had stayed behind to argue with billing about her father's dialysis costs. It was a losing battle, and now she was walking to the subway in a downpour, her mood matching the weather. She turned onto 4th Avenue, head down against the wind, when the screech of tires shattered the hum of the rain. It wasn't a normal skid. It was the sound of metal screaming against asphalt, followed by a sickening, heavy crunch. Sienna's head snapped up. 50 yards ahead, a black Mercedes S-Class had been T-boned by a heavy-duty pickup truck. The truck didn't stop. It reversed, gears grinding, and slammed into the Mercedes again, pinning it against a concrete pillar under the overpass. Then, the gunfire started. Pop, 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 pop. Sienna threw herself behind a dumpster, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She clamped her hands over her ears. This was New York, but this wasn't a mugging. This was an execution. She heard a car door slam, then shouting in Italian. Tires squealed away, leaving only the sound of the rain and the hissing steam from the wrecked Mercedes. Silence. Sienna knew she should run. She should turn around, sprint back to the hospital, and call 911 from the safety of the lobby. But then she heard it, a low, gurgling moan. It was a sound she knew too well from the ER. It was the sound of a lung filling with fluid, against every survival instinct screaming in her brain. Sienna moved. She crept out from behind the dumpster. The street was empty. The attacking truck was gone. She ran to the Mercedes. The driver, a large man in a suit, was slumped over the wheel, clearly gone. The back window was shattered. Sienna peered inside. An older woman, dressed in an elegant silk coat that was now stained dark, was slumped sideways. Her silver hair was matted with blood, and she was clutching her chest. "Mom." Sienna yanked the door handle. Locked. She looked around, grabbed a loose piece of rebar from a nearby construction pile, and smashed the remaining glass of the rear window. She unlocked the door and threw it open. The smell of copper and expensive perfume hit her. "Help me," the woman whispered. Her lips were blue. Sienna went into autopilot. "I'm a nurse. I'm going to help you." She quickly assessed the damage. The woman had a deep laceration on her temple, but the real danger was the sucking chest wound. A bullet had grazed her ribs and punctured the pleural cavity. She was drowning in her own blood. "I need to apply pressure," Sienna said, her voice shaking, but her hands steady. She ripped the silk scarf from the woman's neck. It wasn't enough. Sienna tore off her own scrub jacket, wadded it up, and pressed it hard against the wound. The woman groaned, her eyes rolling back. "Stay with me," Sienna commanded. "What's your name?" "Lucia," the woman rasped. "Tell Dominic." "You can tell him yourself," Sienna snapped, applying more pressure. "You're not dying on my shift." The rain soaked them both. Sienna checked Lucia's pulse. It was thready. She needed to seal the wound properly. Sienna reached into her bag. She didn't have a med kit, but she had a plastic sandwich bag containing her uneaten lunch. She dumped the sandwich, ripped the plastic, and placed it over the wound to create a makeshift occlusive dressing, taping it down with the surgical tape she always kept in her pocket. "Breathe," Sienna whispered. Suddenly, headlights flooded the alley. Sienna froze. Had the attackers come back to finish the job? 3 black SUVs screeched to a halt, boxing her in. Doors flew open, and 6 men spilled out, weapons drawn. These weren't street thugs. They moved with military precision. "Step away from her," one of them roared. Sienna threw her hands up, blood covering her palms. "I'm a nurse. She's stabilizing, but she needs a hospital now." A man stepped out of the lead SUV. He didn't yell. He didn't run. He walked with a terrifying, predatory calm. He wore a charcoal 3-piece suit that cost more than Sienna's entire education. His hair was dark, slicked back, and his eyes were the color of cold steel. He looked at the dead driver. Then he looked at Sienna. Then he looked at the woman in the back seat. "Mother," he said. The word was soft, but it carried the weight of a tombstone. "She has a sucking chest wound," Sienna said, her voice trembling. "I sealed it. If you move her the wrong way, she dies." The man in the suit locked eyes with Sienna. For a second, she thought he was going to shoot her. "Lorenzo," the man said without looking away from Sienna. "Get the car. We take her to Doctor Evans." "She needs an ER," Sienna argued. "No hospitals," the man said. "Get in." "What?" "You treated her. You keep her alive until we get to my doctor. Get in." He didn't wait for an answer. 2 of his men grabbed Sienna and shoved her into the back of the SUV, right next to the bleeding matriarch. The man in the suit sat opposite her, a gun resting casually on his knee, as the convoy sped off into the night, leaving the sirens of the approaching police far behind. Sienna realized 2 things. First, she had just saved Lucia Moretti, the mother of the most dangerous man on the East Coast. Second, she might never go home again. The ride was a blur of motion and silence. Sienna kept her hands on Lucia's wound, monitoring her breathing. The man opposite her, Dominic Moretti. Though she hadn't dared say his name aloud, yet watched her every move. He was like a statue, unblinking, his rage contained behind a mask of icy indifference. They arrived not at a hospital, but at a private underground garage in Manhattan. An elevator whisked them up to a penthouse that spanned the entire top floor. A full medical team was waiting in a room that looked more like an ICU than a bedroom. "Clear out!" a doctor barked at Sienna as they transferred Lucia onto a stretcher. Sienna stepped back, her hands shaking as the adrenaline began to fade. She was covered in blood that wasn't hers. She looked down at her cheap sneakers, ruining the pristine white marble floor. "You," Dominic's voice cut through the chaos. Sienna looked up. He was standing by the window, looking out at the city skyline. He had removed his jacket, revealing a shoulder holster. "Come here," he commanded. Sienna hesitated, then walked over. She stopped 5 feet away. "Is she going to be okay?" "Doctor, Evans is the best trauma surgeon money can buy. If she dies, he dies." Dominic turned to face her. "Who are you?" "Sienna. Sienna Brooks." "Who do you work for?" "Sienna Brooks. St. Jude's Hospital. I told you. I was just walking home." Dominic stepped closer. He towered over her, radiating a heat and intensity that made the air feel thin. He reached out, and Sienna flinched. He paused, then slowly reached toward her face. His thumb grazed her cheek, wiping away a smudge of dirt. "You saved her," he said. "Why?" "She was dying," Sienna said, finding a scrap of courage. "That's what I do. I save people. Even people like us. I didn't know who you were. I just saw a woman bleeding out." Dominic studied her face, searching for a lie. "The men who did this, did you see them?" "I saw a truck, a dark blue Ford. Maybe. I didn't see faces. It was raining." "Good," Dominic said. "For your sake, that is very good." He turned to a man standing by the door. "Lorenzo, check her background, everything. Debts, family, lovers. I want to know what she had for breakfast in 3rd grade." "Wait," Sienna said, panic rising. "I helped you. You can't just investigate me like a criminal. I want to go home." Dominic let out a short, humorless laugh. "Home, Miss Brooks. You just intervened in an assassination attempt on the Moretti family. The people who did this, the Sabatini family, don't leave loose ends. If they know you were there, if they think you saw something, you are a target. I didn't see anything. They won't care." Dominic walked to a bar cart and poured a glass of amber liquid. He downed it in one swallow. "You are not going home. You are staying here. You're kidnapping me." "I'm placing you under my protection," Dominic corrected, "until I find the rats who did this and burn their world to ash. You belong to me." "I have a life, I have a job," Sienna shouted. Dominic slammed the glass down on the bar. The sound echoed like a gunshot. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, gripping her upper arms. His grip was firm, bruising. "Listen to me," he hissed, his face inches from hers. She could smell the whiskey and the faint scent of gunpowder. "You are alive right now because I allow it. You are alive because you put your hands on my mother and kept her heart beating. That buys you my patience, but it does not buy you the right to defy me. You leave this building, you die. Do you understand?" Sienna stared into his eyes. They were terrified. Yes, but beneath the fear, Dominic saw a spark of defiance. She wasn't breaking. "I understand," she whispered. "Good." He released her abruptly. "Lorenzo, show her to the guest suite. Get her fresh clothes. Burn those scrubs." As Lorenzo escorted her out, Sienna looked back. Dominic was on his phone, his voice low and lethal. "Find them. Kill them all. Leave no one standing." Sienna shivered. She had walked out of the rain, but she had stepped straight into hell. 3 days passed. Sienna was trapped in a gilded cage. The guest suite was larger than her entire apartment. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, a bathroom with a jacuzzi, and a closet filled with clothes that Lorenzo had somehow procured in her exact size. But the door was locked from the outside. She had seen no one but the maids and Lorenzo, who brought her meals and vague updates. "Lucia is stable. Sit tight. Don't go near the windows." Sienna was pacing the room, going stir-crazy. She needed to know what was happening. She needed to know if she still had a job, or if she had been reported missing. The lock clicked. Sienna spun around. It wasn't Lorenzo. It was Dominic. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. Tie loose. He looked less like a monster and more like a man carrying the weight of the world. "She's asking for you," he said. Sienna blinked. "Your mother. She woke up an hour ago. She's demanding to see the girl with the sandwich bag." A faint, almost imperceptible smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. Sienna followed him down the hallway to the medical wing. Lucia Moretti was sitting up in bed, hooked up to monitors. but looking surprisingly formidable for a woman who had been shot 3 days ago. "There she is," Lucia rasped, her Italian accent thick. She beckoned Sienna closer. Sienna approached the bed. Lucia reached out and took Sienna's hand. Her grip was weak but warm. "You have gentle hands," Lucia said. "Dominic told me what you did. You saved an old woman from the Reaper." "I just did what I had to," Sienna said softly. "Nonsense," Lucia scoffed. "Most people run from bullets. You ran toward them. That is not training. That is character." She looked at her son. "Dominic, treat her well. She is not a prisoner." Dominic leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "She is a civilian, Mama. She is a liability." "She is a guest," Lucia corrected sharply. "And she needs to call her father. She is worried about him." Sienna looked at Lucia in shock. "How did you know?" "A mother knows worry," Lucia said. "Dominic, let her call." Dominic sighed. He pulled a burner phone from his pocket and handed it to Sienna. "One call. 2 minutes. Do not say where you are. Do not say who you are with. Say you were transferred to a private care facility for a special case, and you'll be out of touch for a week. Speakerphone." Sienna took the phone, her fingers brushing his. The electric jolt was there again, stronger this time. She dialed her father. "Sienna, where have you been? I've been calling the hospital." Her father's voice was frantic. "Dad, I'm okay," she said, her voice catching. "I took a private nursing job, high profile. I signed an NDA. I can't talk much, but the pay is good. It'll cover the dialysis." Oh, thank God. I was so worried. "When will you be home?" "Soon, Dad. I promise. I love you." "Love you too, sweetie." Dominic took the phone back the second the call ended. "You lie well." "I had a good teacher," she muttered, glaring at him. "Come," Dominic said. "Dinner." "I'm not hungry." "I didn't ask." He led her to the dining room. The table was set for 2. It was intimate. Far too intimate. They ate in silence for a while, the only sound the clinking of silverware. "Why do you do it?" Sienna asked suddenly. Dominic looked up from his steak. "Do what?" "This. The violence. The fear. You have enough money to leave it all behind. Why stay?" Dominic put his fork down. He took a sip of wine, his eyes darkening. "You think this is a choice?" "Sienna, we don't choose this life. We are born into it. My father built this empire to protect us from men who would see us starve. Now, I protect it to keep the wolves at bay. If I leave, my family dies. My mother dies. My men die." "So you become the wolf," Sienna said. "Better the wolf than the sheep," Dominic replied. "The sheep get eaten." "I'm a sheep," Sienna challenged. "And you're keeping me in a pen." Dominic leaned forward. The candlelight danced in his eyes. "You are no sheep, Sienna. A sheep would have fled that alley. You are something or else." "What am I?" "I haven't decided yet." The tension in the room shifted. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was curiosity, attraction. It hung heavy in the air, a dangerous magnetism pulling them together. Suddenly, the doors burst open. Lorenzo rushed in, his face pale. "Dom, we have a problem." Dominic didn't look away from Sienna. "It better be important." "Lorenzo!" "It's the Sabatinis," Lorenzo said, breathless. "They know." Dominic stood up slowly. "Know what?" "They know she's here, and they know who she is." Lorenzo threw a manila envelope on the table. Photos spilled out. Photos of Sienna leaving the hospital. Photos of her father walking into the dialysis clinic. and a photo of Sienna's apartment door, riddled with bullet holes. Sienna gasped, covering her mouth. "My dad. He's safe," Lorenzo said quickly. "We got to him first. He's at a safe house." Dominic picked up the photo of the bullet-riddled door. His hand crumpled the photo into a ball. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "How?" Dominic asked, his voice a low growl. "No one knew she was here, except my inner circle." "That's the problem. Dom," Lorenzo said quietly. "We have a leak. Someone inside this penthouse sold her out." Dominic looked at Sienna. The softness was gone. The wolf was back. "Get her back to her room," Dominic ordered. "Lock the door. Double the guards." "Dominic, wait," Sienna pleaded. "Go," he roared. As Lorenzo dragged her away, Sienna looked back. Dominic was standing alone at the head of the table, looking at the people he trusted most, realizing one of them wanted him dead. But what terrified Sienna wasn't the mole. It was the look in Dominic's eyes. It wasn't just anger. It was fear. He was afraid for her. The penthouse, once a sanctuary of silence and luxury, had transformed into a command center of suffocating tension. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and gun oil. For 24 hours, Dominic Moretti had torn his organization apart from the inside out. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. He moved through the expansive rooms like a caged tiger, his temper on a hair trigger. Every guard was interrogated. Every phone was tapped. Every movement was scrutinized. Sienna watched it all from the top of the floating staircase. She was supposed to be locked in her room, but the lock had been picked a skill she'd learned from a wayward ex-boyfriend years ago, though she doubted Dominic would appreciate the talent. Down below, in the sunken living room, Dominic was shouting at a man Sienna recognized as Matteo, his childhood friend and second in command. Matteo was handsome in a rugged, less polished way than Dominic, with a scar running through his left eyebrow. "I want names." "Matteo!" Dominic roared, sweeping a crystal vase off a side table. It shattered into 1,000 glittering shards. How did they know about the extraction? How did they find her father? "We're looking." "Dom," Matteo said, his voice calm, placating. "The Sabatinis are ghosting us. They hit the dialysis clinic an hour before we got there. The old man is safe. We have him at the farmhouse in upstate. But it was too close. Too close is dead in this business." Dominic paced, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "If they touch her father, they own her. If they own her, they think they can get to my mother. It's a domino effect, and I will not let the first piece fall." Sienna felt a cold knot in her stomach. They hit the clinic. Her father was alive, but he was a pawn in a game he didn't understand. She stepped back, the floorboard creaking beneath her foot. Dominic's head snapped up. His hand went to his waistband instantly when he saw it was her. The lethal tension didn't leave his shoulders, but his hand dropped. "I told you to stay in your room," he growled. "I'm not a prisoner." "Dominic, you said that yourself," Sienna said, descending the stairs. Her legs were shaking, but she forced herself to move with purpose. "And shouting at your men won't find the mole." The room went silent. The guards looked at their shoes. Matteo looked at Sienna with a mix of amusement and shock. No one spoke to Dominic Moretti like that. Dominic stared at her, his chest heaving. "Go back upstairs." "You're bleeding," she said, pointing to his hand. Dominic looked down. His knuckles were split open, blood dripping onto the expensive Persian rug. He must have hit something harder than a vase earlier. "It's nothing. It's going to get infected," Sienna said. She reached the bottom of the stairs and walked right up to him. The guards tensed, but Dominic didn't move. He just watched her, his eyes dark pools of exhaustion and fury. "Sit down! Let me clean it!" "I don't have time for—" "Sit down!" It was a battle of wills. For a long, stretched second. Nobody breathed. Then, Dominic let out a sharp exhale and sank onto the leather sofa. "Everyone out," he ordered. "Matteo, stay at the door. No one comes in." The room cleared instantly. Sienna went to the bathroom, grabbed the first aid kit she'd seen earlier, and returned. She sat on the coffee table in front of him, taking his large, battered hand in hers. "This is going to sting," she murmured, dabbing alcohol on the raw knuckles. Dominic didn't flinch. He just watched her face. "You have a death wish, Sienna. Walking down here, challenging me in front of my men. You're not scary when you're throwing a tantrum," she said, focusing on wrapping the gauze. "You're just loud." Dominic let out a low chuckle, a sound that vibrated through his chest. "A tantrum. That's a new one. Most people call it a death sentence." "I'm not most people." "No," Dominic said softly. "You aren't." He used his free hand to tilt her chin up. His touch was rough, calloused, but incredibly gentle. "Why didn't you run when you picked the lock? The elevator code is in my office. You could have tried." "And go where?" Sienna asked, her voice trembling slightly as she looked into his steel-grey eyes. "They know my name. They know my face. You're the only thing standing between me and a bullet." "Is that the only reason you stayed?" Sienna didn't answer. She couldn't. Because the truth was terrifying. The truth was that in the chaos of the last 3 days, amidst the fear and the violence, she had felt more alive than she had in years, and this man, this dangerous, broken, beautiful monster made her feel safe in a way she couldn't explain. "Dominic," she whispered. He leaned in. The air between them crackled. His lips were inches from hers. She could feel his breath, hot and ragged. Boom! The world exploded. The floor-to-ceiling window behind the sofa shattered inward. A concussive blast threw them both off the couch. Sienna hit the floor hard, her ears ringing. Dust and smoke filled the room instantly. "Down, stay down!" Dominic was on top of her in a heartbeat, covering her body with his own. Gunfire erupted. It wasn't coming from the street. It was coming from the hallway, inside the penthouse. "Matteo!" Dominic screamed, pulling his gun. There was no answer, just the thwip-thwip-thwip of silenced automatic weapons tearing through the mahogany doors. "We're compromised," Dominic hissed into her ear. He grabbed her arm, hauling her up. "Move! Now." They didn't run for the front door. Dominic dragged her toward the kitchen. He kicked open the pantry door, shoved aside a shelf of canned goods, and punched a code into a hidden keypad. The back wall slid open, revealing a dark, narrow service shaft. "Go!" he shouted, shoving her inside. Sienna stumbled into the darkness. Dominic followed, hitting a button that sealed the wall behind them, just as the kitchen door was kicked in. "Clear room is clear!" a voice shouted from the kitchen. Sienna froze. She knew that voice. It wasn't a stranger. It was the guard who had brought her breakfast that morning. A man named Carlo. "They're inside," she gasped. "Dominic, it's your own men." Dominic's face was a mask of cold fury in the dim emergency light of the shaft. "Not all of them. Just the ones who want to get paid." He grabbed a tactical flashlight from the wall and handed it to her. "This leads to the subway tunnels. It's an old prohibition route. We have to move fast. If they secure the perimeter, we're dead." What about your mother? Sienna asked, panic gripping her chest. Lorenzo moved her an hour ago. That's why the attack happened now. They realized the prize was gone, so they came for the consolation. He looked at her. Me. And me, Sienna added. Dominic looked at her, and for a fleeting second, the mask slipped. She saw the terror in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. I won't let them take you, he swore. Come on. They descended into the darkness, leaving the burning penthouse behind. But as they ran through the damp, rat-infested tunnels beneath the city, Sienna realized the war hadn't just started. It had already been lost. The enemy was inside the gates, and they had nowhere left to hide. The rain had returned. It always seemed to rain when Sienna's life was falling apart. They had emerged from a grate in a back alley in Queens, 3 miles from the penthouse. Dominic had hot-wired a nondescript Honda Civic, a skill he performed with disturbing ease, and they had been driving for hours. They were heading north, away from the city, away from the cameras, away from the life Sienna knew. The destination was a cabin near Lake Placid. Dominic called it a safe house, but as they pulled up the gravel driveway, it looked more like a fortress buried in the woods. It was dark, secluded, and surrounded by dense pine forest. Inside, the cabin was cold. Dominic went straight to the fireplace, striking a match to the ready-made kindling. There's no cell service here, he said, his back to her. No internet. It's a dead zone. We're ghosts. Sienna sank onto a dusty armchair, wrapping her arms around herself. She was still wearing the silk pajamas from the penthouse, now ruined with mud and grease. Dominic threw his suit jacket over her. It was heavy and smelled of him smoke, rain, and expensive cologne. Here, he said, handing her a bottle of water and a protein bar from a stash in the kitchen. It's not risotto, but it will keep you alive. How long do we stay here? Sienna asked, her voice hollow. Until I know who sold us out. Dominic paced the small room, the firelight casting long, dancing shadows against the log walls. It has to be a capo, someone with high-level clearance. Carlo was just a grunt. He wouldn't know the layout of the penthouse unless someone gave him the blueprints. You trust Matteo? Sienna asked. Dominic stopped pacing. Matteo is my brother, in everything but blood. We grew up together. I saved his life in Palermo. He saved mine in Chicago. It's not him. Dominic. The attack happened right after he left the room, Sienna pointed out gently. It wasn't him, Dominic snapped, his voice echoing off the rafters. He took a deep breath, composing himself. I know my men. Sienna, I know who is loyal. Do you? The question hung in the air. Dominic looked at her, his eyes full of pain. He walked over and knelt in front of her chair. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I dragged you into this. You should be at the hospital, worrying about patient charts, not dodging bullets. I'm not sorry, Sienna said, surprising herself. She reached out and touched his face. The stubble was rough against her fingertips. You saved your mother. You saved me. You're a good man. Dominic, you just do bad things. Dominic closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. You see light where there is only shadow. Sienna. He opened his eyes and looked at her with an intensity that made her breath hitch. I can't promise you a happy ending, but I can promise you that as long as I draw breath, no one will hurt you. He leaned in, and this time, there were no explosions, just the soft press of his lips against hers. It was tentative at first, A question asked and answered. Then it deepened into something desperate. It was a kiss fueled by adrenaline and fear and a connection that defied logic. Sienna's hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. For a moment, the Mafia, the hitmen, the betrayal, it all faded away. There was just him. But the moment was shattered by a sound. A low buzzing. Dominic pulled back instantly, his hand going for his gun. I said there was no service here. It's not my phone, Sienna whispered. They looked around. The sound was coming from Dominic's discarded suit jacket, which was draped over Sienna's shoulders. Dominic reached into the inner pocket and pulled out a small, black device. It wasn't a phone. It was a long-range walkie-talkie, the kind used for tactical ops. "This isn't mine," Dominic said, his blood running cold. "Lorenzo gave me this jacket before we left the garage 3 days ago." The radio buzzed again. A voice crackled through the static. "Alpha 1, do you copy? The tracker is stationary. They're at the cabin. Green light to engage." Dominic stared at the radio, his face draining of color. "The jacket," he whispered. "There's a tracker in the lining." Sienna stood up, the jacket falling to the floor. "Lorenzo?" "No," Dominic said, his eyes hard as flint. "Lorenzo doesn't have the authority to authorize a hit team. He takes orders." "From who?" "From the underboss." Dominic looked at Sienna, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "Matteo? But you said he was your brother," Sienna stammered. "He is," Dominic said, his voice breaking. "And Cain was Abel's brother, too." He grabbed Sienna's hand. "We have to go, now." "They said they're here," Sienna said, panic rising. "If we go out the front door." "We don't go out the front!" Dominic kicked the rug aside, revealing a trap door. "My father was a paranoid man. He built escape tunnels in every property he owned." He yanked the trap door open. Below was a ladder descending into darkness. "Go," he ordered. "Not without you. I'm right behind you." Sienna climbed down. Dominic followed. But before he closed the trap door, he grabbed a bottle of high-proof vodka from the shelf and smashed it over the fireplace logs. The flames roared up, catching the curtains. "What are you doing?" Sienna yelled from the bottom of the ladder. "Covering our tracks," Dominic said grimly as he climbed down and sealed the door above them. "If they want a body, I'll give them a cremation." They ran through the earthen tunnel, the air damp and smelling of mold. It was longer than the one in the city, stretching for nearly a mile before emerging near an old boathouse on the edge of the lake. They burst out into the night air. The rain had stopped, replaced by a thick, eerie fog. "The boat," Dominic said, pointing to a covered speedboat tied to the dock. "Keys are in the ignition." They jumped in. Dominic fired the engine. It roared to life, shattering the silence of the lake. As they sped away into the fog, Sienna looked back at the shore. Through the trees, she could see the orange glow of the cabin engulfed in flames. And then she saw them, silhouettes on the dock, men with rifles. And standing in front of them, illuminated by the firelight reflecting off the water, was a man in a tan trench coat. Matteo. He wasn't shooting. He was just watching them leave. He raised a hand in a mock salute. Dominic saw him too. He didn't say a word. He just gripped the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. "He let us go," Sienna whispered, confused. "Why?" "He didn't let us go," Dominic said, his voice void of all emotion. "He's playing with his food. He wants the chase." He turned the boat toward the far side of the lake, where the dark highway awaited. "He thinks he's won," Dominic said. "He thinks he took my city, my men, and my life. But he made one mistake." "What?" Sienna asked. Dominic looked at her, and the fire in his eyes was hotter than the burning cabin behind them. "He left me alive, and he let me keep you." Dominic pulled a burner phone from the boat's emergency kit. He dialed a number. "Who are you calling?" "The only person left I can trust," Dominic said. "My mother." The phone rang twice. Then a click. "Dominic." Lucia's voice was weak but alert. "Mama, it's Matteo. He's the rat." There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence. "I know," Lucia said. Dominic froze. "You knew, I suspected," Lucia said. "But suspicion is not proof. Now we have proof. Dominic, listen to me carefully. Matteo thinks he has outsmarted us, but he forgets who taught him the game." "Where are you?" Dominic asked. "I am at the old chapel," Lucia said, "with the loyalists. But Dominic, he has something of yours." Sienna felt her heart stop. "What?" Dominic asked. "Not what," Lucia said softly. "Who? Who does he have?" "Mama." "He has Sienna's father." Sienna let out a strangled cry. Dominic's hand flew out to steady her. When Dominic demanded, "Tonight, they intercepted the transport. Matteo has him at the shipyard." He left a message. "He wants a trade." "Me for him?" Dominic asked. "No," Lucia said. "He wants the girl." Dominic looked at Sienna. She was pale, tears streaming down her face. But she wasn't looking away. She was listening. "Tell him to go to hell," Dominic said. "He says if she is not there by midnight, he will send her father back to her in pieces," Lucia said, her voice trembling with rage. Dominic hung up the phone. He cut the engine, letting the boat drift in the fog. "Sienna," he started. "Don't," she interrupted. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "Don't tell me it's going to be okay. He has my dad. We will get him back. He wants me. Dominic. Why? Why does he want me?" "Because you're the one thing he knows I won't sacrifice," Dominic said. "He wants to break me, and taking you is the only way to do it." Sienna looked at the dark water. She thought about her father, the gentle man who raised her alone, who worked 2 jobs to put her through nursing school, who was now terrified and alone because of her. She looked back at Dominic, the man who had kidnapped her, protected her, and now loved her. "Take me to him," she said. "No. Dominic, it's my father. I can't let him die. I am not trading you," Dominic shouted. "I will burn the city down before I hand you over to that butcher. If we don't go, he dies." Sienna grabbed his lapels. "You said you protect what's yours. Well, my father is mine. And if you care about me, if you care about us, you will help me save him." Dominic stared at her. He saw the resolve in her eyes. She wasn't asking for permission. She was demanding a partnership. "We don't trade," Dominic said slowly. "We don't negotiate." "Then what do we do?" Dominic restarted the engine. The roar of the motor sounded like a war cry. "We attack," he said. "We go to the shipyard. We walk into his trap, and we spring it." He looked at the horizon, where the lights of New York City glowed like a distant fire. "Matteo wants a show," Dominic growled. "I'll give him the greatest tragedy he's ever seen, but it won't be mine." The Brooklyn Navy Yard at midnight was a graveyard of steel and shadows. Fog rolled off the East River, thickened yellow under the sodium floodlights, obscuring the towering cranes that looked like skeletal dinosaurs picking at the bones of the city. Dominic parked the stolen Honda 3 blocks away. He checked his weapon a Sig Sauer P226 he had retrieved from a hidden compartment under the dashboard and handed a smaller Glock 19 to Sienna. "Safety is off," he said, his voice devoid of the warmth she had seen in the cabin. "Point and squeeze, don't think, just survive." Sienna took the gun. It was heavy, cold, and alien in her hand. A week ago, her hands held IV bags and charts. Now they held death. "My father," she whispered. "He's really in there." "Matteo is predictable in his theatrics," Dominic said, staring at the rusting gates of Warehouse 4. "He wants an audience. He wants me to see him take everything." "What's the plan?" Sienna asked. "We walk in," Dominic said. "I offer myself. He takes the bait. You get your father and run." "That's a terrible plan," Sienna hissed. "You die in that plan." "It's the only plan where you live," Dominic replied. He turned to her, his eyes searching hers one last time. "Sienna, when I give the signal." "What signal?" "You'll know." He leaned in and kissed her forehead. It felt like a benediction. "Stay close." They moved through the shadows, slipping through a cut in the chain-link fence. The smell of diesel, rust, and rotting fish hung heavy in the air. The silence was absolute, save for the distant, mournful horn of a tugboat. Inside Warehouse 4, the space was cavernous. Stacks of shipping containers created a maze of metal canyons. In the center, under a single, buzzing halogen light, was a clearing, and there, tied to a wooden chair, was her father. He looked small and frail. His face was bruised, his glasses missing, his grey hair matted with blood. "Dad!" Sienna screamed, running forward before Dominic could stop her. "Sienna, no!" Dominic lunged, grabbing her arm, but they were already in the light. "Punctual," a voice echoed from the darkness. Slow clapping filled the warehouse. Matteo stepped out from behind a red shipping container. He was flanked by 6 men, all heavily armed with assault rifles. He wore a pristine white trench coat, a stark contrast to the grime around them. "I have to say, Dom," Matteo smiled, his teeth white and predatory. "I didn't think you'd actually bring her. I thought you'd try to be the hero and come alone. Let him go." "Matteo," Dominic said, his voice echoing off the corrugated metal walls. He stepped in front of Sienna, shielding her with his body. "This is between you and me. The old man is a civilian. He's nothing. He's leverage." Matteo shrugged. He walked over to Sienna's father, placing a hand on the old man's shoulder. Her father flinched, whimpering through the gag. "And looking at your face right now, I'd say he's very valuable leverage." "You want the seat?" Dominic asked, holstering his gun slowly, showing his empty hands. "Take it. Take the family. Take the territory. It's yours. Just let them walk." Matteo laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "You think this is about the chair, you arrogant son of a bitch. This isn't about business. It's about respect. You went soft. Dominic, you let enemies live. You made truces. You brought a nurse into the inner sanctum." He pointed a gun at Sienna. "You polluted the bloodline with weakness. I'm just cutting out the rot." "You're not cutting anything," Dominic growled. "You're just a jealous child playing with matches." Matteo's face twisted in rage. "Kill the old man." One of the guards raised his rifle toward Sienna's father. "Wait!" Sienna screamed. She pushed past Dominic, stepping into the open. "Take me. You want me. I'm right here. Let him go, and I'll go with you. I'll do whatever you want." "Sienna, don't," Dominic warned, his voice low and dangerous. Matteo looked at her, licking his lips. "Now that is a tempting offer. The famous angel of decay, the woman who bewitched the great Dominic Moretti. He holstered his gun and gestured to his men. "Bring her here." 2 guards moved toward Sienna. Dominic tensed, his hand twitching toward his holster. "Oh," Matteo warned, aiming his gun at Dominic's head. "One move, Dom, and she watches you die before I kill her father." Sienna walked forward. Her legs felt like lead. She looked at her father, whose eyes were wide with terror, shaking his head no. She stopped 5 feet from Matteo. "Smart girl," Matteo sneered. "Now, on your knees." Sienna looked at him. Then she looked back at Dominic. Dominic gave the smallest of nods. Sienna dropped to her knees. But as she did, her hand brushed the pocket of her scrub pants. "Good," Matteo said, distracted by his victory. He looked past her to Dominic. "Watch closely, brother. This is how a real king rules." Matteo raised his gun to execute Dominic. Click. The lights went out. Total, pitch-black darkness enveloped the warehouse. "What the hell?" Matteo shouted. "Flashlights now." In the chaos, Sienna didn't freeze. She rolled. She rolled toward her father's chair, just as she and Dominic had discussed in the car. It was the signal. Dominic had rigged the power grid of the warehouse using a remote breaker he'd accessed earlier, via his phone. The signal wasn't a word. It was the dark. Gunfire erupted. Muzzle flashes lit up the warehouse like a strobe light, revealing brief, terrifying snapshots of violence. Bang, bang. Dominic was moving, firing 2 shots into the chest of the nearest guard. Rat-tat-tat! The guards fired blindly toward where Dominic had been standing, chewing up the concrete floor. Sienna reached her father. She fumbled with the knots, but they were too tight. She grabbed the small medical shears she always kept in her pocket, a habit she'd never broken, and sawed at the ropes. Come on, she muttered. A hand grabbed her hair. "You little bitch!" Matteo screamed in the dark. He yanked her back. Sienna screamed, slashing backward with the shears. She felt the metal bite into flesh. Matteo howled, letting go. The lights flickered back on backup generators kicking in. The scene was chaos. 3 of Matteo's men were down. Dominic was behind a stack of crates, trading fire with the remaining 3. Matteo was clutching his thigh, blood seeping through his white trench coat. He glared at Sienna, raising his gun. "Goodbye, nurse." Blam! The shot was deafening. Sienna flinched, waiting for the pain, waiting for the end. But it didn't come. Matteo stumbled back, a look of shock on his face. A red flower bloomed on his white chest. He looked down at it. Confused. He looked up. Behind Sienna, standing in the open doorway of the warehouse, was a figure in a wheelchair. It was Lucia Moretti. She held a smoking revolver in her trembling hand. Behind her stood Lorenzo and a dozen men in black tactical gear, the Loyalists. "Mama!" Matteo wheezed, blood bubbling from his lips. "I told you." "Matteo," Lucia said, her voice like iron. "I brought you into this world. I can take you out." Matteo collapsed to his knees, then fell face forward onto the dirty concrete. The traitor was dead. The remaining guards dropped their weapons instantly, raising their hands. Silence returned to the warehouse, heavier than before. Dominic emerged from behind the crates. He was limping, a graze on his arm bleeding freely. But he didn't look at his mother. He didn't look at the dead men. He ran to Sienna. Sienna. He fell to his knees beside her, grabbing her face, checking her for wounds. "Did he hurt you? Are you hit?" "I'm okay," she sobbed, the adrenaline crashing. "I'm okay. My dad." Dominic pulled a knife and slashed the remaining ropes binding her father. The old man collapsed into Sienna's arms, weeping. "I've got you, Dad," she whispered, rocking him. "I've got you." Dominic stood up and walked over to his mother. He looked at the gun in her hand, then at the body of his childhood friend. "You shouldn't have come," Dominic said softly. "You're still healing." "A mother protects her cubs," Lucia said, handing the gun to Lorenzo. She looked at Sienna and her father. "And the ones they love." Dominic looked back at Sienna. She was covered in dirt, blood, and tears. She looked shattered. "Get them to the car," Dominic ordered Lorenzo. "Take them to the hospital. The best suite." "Where are you going?" Sienna asked. Looking up, Dominic looked at the body of Matteo. "I have a mess to clean up." "Go, Sienna, it's over." Sienna hesitated. She wanted to stay. She wanted to hold him. But she looked at her father, who was shaking uncontrollably. He needed her more. "Come back to me," she whispered. Dominic didn't answer. He just turned away, and the shadows of the warehouse swallowed him whole. 2 weeks had passed since the nightmare at the shipyard. New York had returned to its rhythm, the relentless rain replaced by a crisp, golden autumn. But for Sienna Brooks, the world had shifted on its axis. She had returned to her small apartment, though it no longer felt like home. Her father was safe, recovering in a private rehabilitation center in Vermont, fully paid for by an anonymous donor. He asked no questions. He knew better now. Sienna had gone back to work at St. Jude's Hospital, trying to lose herself in the routine of vitals and patient charts. But every time a black SUV drove past the ER entrance, her heart hammered against her ribs. She hadn't heard a word from Dominic, not a text, not a call. It was as if he had vanished, as if the connection between them, that fire that had burned so bright in the darkness, had been severed the moment the danger passed. "Nurse Brooks!" Sienna snapped out of her daze. "Doctor Evans!" The trauma surgeon who had treated Lucia that first night was standing at the nurse's station. He looked out of place in the public ward, his suit too expensive, his demeanor too stiff. "You're needed," he said simply. "I'm on shift. Doctor, I can't just leave." "It's not a request. Sienna." Evans lowered his voice. "He's waiting." Sienna's heart skipped a beat. She didn't ask who. She threw her stethoscope on the desk and followed him. A familiar black Mercedes was waiting in the loading dock. Lorenzo opened the door, a rare, knowing smile touching his lips. The car didn't take her to the penthouse. It took her to the New York Public Library. They bypassed the main entrance, slipping through a side security door and walking through the silent marble halls until they reached the majestic Astor Hall. The room was closed to the public. In the center of the vast, high-ceilinged chamber stood a long table made of dark oak. Around it sat 12 men. Sienna froze. She recognized the tension in the room immediately. These weren't just men. These were the heads of the 5 families. The air smelled of cigars and absolute power. At the head of the table sat Dominic Moretti. He looked different, harder, colder. He wore a black suit that seemed to absorb the light. But when Sienna entered, he stood up. Every eye in the room turned to her. She felt small in her blue scrubs and sneakers, standing on the polished marble floor. "Gentlemen," Dominic said, his voice ringing through the hall. "Thank you for your patience." An older man with a thick grey mustache, the Don of the Genovese family, scoffed, slamming his hand on the table. "Moretti, you called a summit to bring in A nurse. This is an insult to the high table. This is the future, Dominic said calmly. He walked away from the head of the table, ignoring the whispers of the most powerful criminals in the country, and stopped in front of Sienna. "You came," he said softly, his eyes searching hers. "You sent for me," Sienna replied, her voice trembling. "After 2 weeks of silence. I had to make sure it was safe. I had to purge the ranks. I couldn't bring you back until I was sure no one would ever touch you again." He reached out, his fingers grazing her hand. "Are you sure?" "I am now." Dominic took her hand and led her not to a side chair, but to the head of the table to his own seat. He pulled the chair out for her. The room erupted. "Dominic, have you lost your mind?" The Genovese Don stood up again. "You cannot seat a civilian at the high table. It is against the laws." Dominic turned to the room, his expression lethal. The silence he commanded was absolute. "The laws," Dominic said, his voice a terrifying whisper, "were written by men who are dead. The laws said my mother should have died in that alley. The laws said I should have killed this woman to keep a secret. The laws said Matteo was my brother. Yet he was the one who put a knife in my back." He placed a hand on the back of Sienna's chair. "This woman walked into a war zone with nothing but a pair of scissors to save my blood. She possesses more courage in her little finger than Matteo had in his entire body. From this day forward, the Moretti family has no king, it has a union. Sienna Brooks is not just under my protection. She is my partner." He looked around the table, daring anyone to object. "Any disrespect shown to her is a declaration of war against me, and you all know how I wage war." Slowly, the Genovese Don sat back down. He looked at Sienna, really looked at her, and gave a stiff nod. Dominic looked down at Sienna, a smirk playing on his lips. "Well, are you in, or are you out?" Sienna looked at the men around the table, then at the dangerous man beside her. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was the woman who had walked through hell and came out holding the devil's hand. She laced her fingers with his. "I'm not going anywhere." Dominic raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles in front of the lords of the underworld. "Then long live the Queen," he whispered. What a ride from a rainy alleyway to the head of the high table. Sienna and Dominic's story proves that sometimes the wrong turn leads to the right destination. It wasn't just about the romance. It was about courage, loyalty, and breaking the rules for the people you love. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more intense Mafia dramas like this one. What would you have done in Sienna's shoes? Would you have saved Lucia, or would you have run? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.